As Sandy mentioned, my name is Jason Thomas. I work for an organization called Thomson Reuters. I really like it when people misintroduce me and say that I work for Thomas Reuters instead of Thomson Reuters. I wish I had the money that this organization has, right? So Thomson Reuters is a very large organization, 60,000 people all over the world. And myself and my colleague Bill work for a very small part of that organization called Thomson Reuters Special Services, which services the classified business of our company. I lead innovation for that entity, which is a phenomenal job. I know you all here probably think you have the best job in the world, but I will correct you and say that I do. I lead innovation, which basically means I get to think about how bad people do bad things and figure out ways to stop them. And using our content, using our capability, our analytic resource, all that kind of stuff. And a part of that job actually allows me to come speak to audiences like you about some of the things that we've discovered and kind of mitigation strategies around those things that we've discovered. And I would say probably a good 30% of my time is giving presentations similar to this to audiences all around the world about emerging technology. And most people, when I talk about emerging technology, at least initially, their eyes start to glaze over, right? And they wonder how many what IDS we're going to talk about, what firewall rules are we going to set up, and that's not exactly what this presentation is. In fact, we won't mention ones and zeros at all in this conversation. And the reason why we're going to spend more time talking about the cultural and social influences around cyber as opposed to the ones and zeros is because that's what ultimately this comes down to. I mean, think of it this way. If you have an information security mission, 90% of your problem would go away if you could keep people from clicking a link. Literally, 90% of your information security problems would go away if people would stop clicking on fishes, right? That's a social problem. That's a cultural problem. That's not a technical issue, right? And the fact that we are surrounded by technology and many times don't realize how ubiquitous it really is adds to that threat, right? I carry in my pocket two phones. I have a work phone and a personal phone. And my work phone and my personal phone obviously are separate because we deal with different things or my company doesn't allow us to bring our own devices. But each of my devices, I can do almost anything on my device that this device does, right? With the sole exception of I'm required to carry a piece of plastic that proves my identity, right? And this is slowly changing, by the way. Iowa is in the midst of a pilot now that will put your driver's license on your mobile phone. So when you get pulled over, or when you enter a facility or whatever, instead of pulling out a driver's license, you would pull out your mobile device and show the app, basically, that proves who you are. That's an amazing thing, right? And think of it this way. You know, we use these devices all day, every day, and we don't really realize the impact they have on our lives. Twice in the last 2 months, I've been in a bathroom and watched a man drop his mobile device straight into a urinal he just used and then reach his hand right in and pull it right back out. Can you think of anything you would put your hand in a toilet for beyond a mobile phone, maybe a wedding ring, right? I can't think of anything. Right? That's the control these devices have over us. Let me make it a bit more practical for you because at least half of you don't go into men's bathrooms. So look at your neighbor. Turn and look at your neighbor right now. Keep looking at your neighbor. Don't look at me. Keep looking at your neighbor. Keep looking at your neighbor. In 2014, stop looking at me. Keep looking at your neighbor. In 2014, McAfee released a study, keep looking at your neighbor. I know it's uncomfortable. It's okay. In 2014, McAfee released a study. In that study, keep looking at your neighbor. In that study, they found half of all Americans had shared an explicit email or text message with someone else. Keep looking at your neighbor. What that means is if you didn't send it, the person you're looking at did. Right? That's an amazing statistic. Amazing. And in fact, it's 12% higher than people who will share banking information and 7% higher than people who will share a password. So more people will send a sext message a nude photo of themselves instead of sharing a password. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy, right? We live in a phenomenal time, a phenomenal world, and we've forgotten, or we've chosen to forget the influence these technologies have over us. Right? There's an app, if you have an Android phone, raise your hand. Actually, raise your hand if you do not have a mobile phone. You do not own a mobile phone. Wow. What do the rest of you think of him? Your wife has one, you don't have one. Think back 20 years ago, 1995. Raise your hand if you had a mobile device in 95. What do the rest of you think of that guy in the back? Oh, more than a few. What do you guys think about those people who have had devices in 95? What did you think back then? They're cool. Drug dealers. They're rich, right? Who do they think they are? Why do they have a mobile phone? Right? Do you see what's happened over the last 20 years? We've gone from a culture that thinks owning a mobile device is odd to carrying one all the time. And in fact, and I'm going to pick on you just a teensy bit, in fact, most of you, when he raised his hand and said he did not have a mobile phone, my guess is your first response was, why? Right? And no joke, I give this presentation all the time, no joke, I very rarely have somebody raise their hand and say that they don't have a mobile device. But no joke, after the presentation, someone will come up to me, inevitably, and I'm not saying this about you, but someone will come up to me inevitably and go, that's the weird guy. No one talks to him. Right? And I'm not saying that's you at all. But most times that's what happens. So you see what's happened over the last 20 years. We've gone from a culture that has not embraced technology as a part of our lives to fully embracing it. If you have left your house without your mobile device in the morning when you come to work, what did you do? You turned around and went back and got it. Just like a wallet. Right? Because you can't stand not to be connected to it. Right? We live in an amazing time. Right? Whoop, make sure this works. There we go. Google puts out an app. If you have an Android phone, this app's called Google Now. You have it most times by default installed on your OS. Some carriers don't by default have it, but you can certainly get it if you have an Android. You can actually get this if you have an iPhone as well, but it obviously isn't pre-installed. It's called Google Now. And what it does is it answers questions before I ask it for my mobile phone. So I use Google for everything. I use it to manage my email. So it knows every email I send and every email I receive. It scans those emails. Because I have my GPS turned on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, Google knows every place my phone is at. By the way, I also own Nest. Nest is owned by Google. Nest is a digital thermostat that manages the temperature. It's an HVAC management system in my home. I also use Waze. You guys familiar with Waze? W-A-Z-E. Waze is by far the most popular traffic control app in the world. It's a crowdsourcing app that pretty much allows you to know where speed traps are. But that also is owned by Google now. So Google knows where I'm driving, Google knows if I'm in my house, and Google knows where my mobile phone is through Google Now. At the same time, I use the Google browser, Chrome, and I use that across all of my devices. And I sync all of my search history across all of those devices. So what I search on my laptop, what I search on my desktop, what I search on my tablet, and what I search on my phone, Google knows and remembers across all of those devices. I travel a lot. And I listen to music and I play a lot of movies in my travel. So I use Google Play to manage all of my movies and music. It knows all of my favorite bands because it knows what music I listen to all the time. And it knows what my favorite movies are and what my favorite actors and actresses are based on the movies I watch. So when I step off a plane in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I turn my phone on, the first thing that Google does is it tells me on my phone, before I have to ask it, what bars where my favorite bands are playing here in New Mexico, where they're at, and would I like tickets to go see them? And how does it know that I'm interested in bars in New Mexico? Because I've been Googling beer a lot off of my mobile phone, right? My point is that it tells me things before I have to ask it, right? And I get a benefit out of it, right? The benefit is I can offload tasks that I previously had to worry about to a machine that can now tell me about those tasks before I ask it. Right? Google knows, if I pull up my phone now, I can show it to you. Google knows where I parked my car at the airport. I don't have to tell it. There's actually a little card on the Google Now app that tells me where my car is parked. Google Now, I live and work in Northern Virginia. Traffic in Northern Virginia, if you've never been there, is a nightmare. Google Now will give me an alert about 20 minutes before I need to leave work to beat traffic. Right? It's an amazing application. My fear is that most of us use these applications without realizing what we're opting into allowing them to use. And of course we all sit here and go, nah, we would never opt into anything. Why do you use Google Now? I would never use that. Well, really? 8 years ago, the iPhone as a device didn't exist. Right? Now, there's only one person in this entire room that doesn't have a mobile phone. Right? Yeah, I think we've checked in, right, in terms of using technology. And interestingly, there's lots of other technologies out there that are rapidly changing the world. This is Periscope. Anybody know what Periscope is? So Periscope is an app that's put out by Twitter. And what it allows you to do is you can live broadcast video from your mobile phone through your Twitter account, and then anybody who's interested in watching can watch the video that you are live streaming. Right? And this obviously wouldn't matter that much because there are other utilities out there that allow for live streaming. But what's neat about this is it takes little to no effort to set up, and people can comment on the live stream as it's being streamed. So people who are watching the video can actually comment and say things like, well, why don't you show me a picture of blah instead of what you're showing me? Right? And interestingly, 2 weekends ago in Florida, of all places, a woman was, a news story was reported where a woman was periscoping, live streaming, her driving her vehicle while drunk. So she got in a car drunk, turned on Periscope and began to drive, and was talking to the audience and driving while she's talking. The really disconcerting thing about that is that the local police department didn't find out about it through Periscope because they, in the organization, policy restricts them from downloading applications to mobile phones that are used for government purpose. So they didn't even know she was doing it. Somebody called in and told them that they were browsing Twitter and found this stream of somebody driving drunk and broadcasting it. And the cops still couldn't get approval to download Periscope to track this woman. They had no idea where she's at. Right? So they were on the phone with somebody else who was watching the stream, and they were telling the cops where the woman was based on things that he saw in the stream, landmarks and that kind of stuff. Very dangerous situation. How easy would it be for me to walk in here and set up a mobile phone anywhere, and say I buy 50 of them, and I set them up, and I literally broadcast video all day long, every day. How hard would that be? Not very difficult, right? And Twitter will tell you that they have systems in place that are doing live review of the video that's being captured for intellectual property reasons. So one of the interesting things about this technology is you could walk into a movie theater and you could literally live stream the movie just by sitting in the theater. And how are they going to stop you? Right? Twitter claims that they have technology that can detect that. I can tell you, having tested it, that if it works, it's never worked in the times that I've done it. Right? So we are surrounded by technologies, and the challenge we have is how do we catch up? Right? How do we live in a world where we build tools and then those tools build us? Right? Winston Churchill in 1948 is standing in front of the rebuilding of the Parliament building. Right? And he says these words, we build dwellings and dwellings build us. And what he means is the way we build our environment, the way we structure our environment influences how we live our lives. And technology works the same way. Right? The fact that you will turn around and go back and pick up your phone after you've left it in the morning means that technology rules you. Putting your hand in a full-on toilet to pull out a mobile phone means that technology runs your life. Right? My fear is that we haven't realized how these tools are helping influence and shape our lives. Right? Well, how did it all start? Well, long time ago, right? This was one of the first commercially available personal computers. It was called the kitchen computer, right? And actually, one of these is actually in the, how many times can I say actually? One of these is in the Computer History Museum in California. And I have a visit scheduled to go out there, and I'm planning to get a selfie with this machine. You can tell how interesting my life is. I take selfies of computers and me. But it came out in 1969, $10,000. What was interesting about this machine is it had late 1960s ergonomics built into it. So the front part of that machine is actually a cutting board. Honeywell, who was the manufacturer of this machine, thought that the only people who would buy this were homemakers. So this machine was built to store recipes. That's a cutting board on the front end, so you could chop your veggies and store your recipes all in one fell swoop. And the interesting thing about this device is that the input for it, so now our input for machines are keyboards, right? The input for this device was a teletype, right? Honeywell, this is a page out of the Neiman Marcus catalog, by the way. Honeywell, through Neiman Marcus, sold 0 of these. Not one of these machines made it to market, or it made it to market, but not one of them made it to a consumer. Lots of money, right? Very slow processor, 4K of memory. If you have a digital wristwatch, your digital wristwatch has more memory than this device does, right? So 1969, what else happened in 1969 from a phenomenal technological perspective? Land on the moon, yeah, absolutely, right? Fast forward to 1984, mobile phone technology. Who had one of these? Anybody? Yeah. Do you know what's interesting about this is this phone weighs about 2 pounds. My father-in-law is a doctor, and he has one of these. He kept it. I used to debate whether to carry this to presentations to show people, because many of the presentations I give are to people who don't understand old technology. For example, there are probably people in this room who do not remember a television set without a remote control, right? So I used to think about, well, I'll take this with me to show people that this Zach Morris phone actually exists, right? Zach Morris is the guy off Saved by the Bell, by the way. Weighs 2 pounds. The interesting thing about this device, and those of you who had this know, you got about an hour's worth of talk time, and then you literally had to charge it for 12 to get another hour's worth of talk time, right? Amazing device. By the way, one of the first coverage areas for this device was the Washington, D.C. area. $4,000 this thing cost. And we carry around mobile phones now like they don't mean anything. We drop them in toilets, right? We have devices that represent and we can access the entire human corpus of knowledge, right? And we use them to send sexy pictures of ourselves to each other, right? So fast forward to November of 2013.